We continue by, again, looking at the Catholic vote in exclusive polling from EWTN News and Real Clear Opinion Research. Tonight, the issues important to Catholic voters and some startling statistics over what Catholics believe. The poll found only 50% of Catholics surveyed believe in the real presence of the Eucharist. Also, 50% of Catholics surveyed say they never go to confession. Once again, we are joined by Matthew Bunson, Executive Editor and Washington Bureau Chief for EWTN News, Carl Cannon, Washington Bureau Chief of Real Clear Politics, and on Skype, Susan Crabtree, White House and National Political Correspondent for Real Clear Politics. Carl, let's start with you. Can you give us a recap of this poll?
Well, we asked a lot of questions. Do Catholics want Joe Biden to run again? In a word, no. Where are they on what's the most important issue? It's not immigration, it's not abortion, it's not education, it's the economy. And these were large numbers. And but we also asked a series of cultural issues, where Catholics are on some of these culture war issues that tear us apart on Capitol Hill, where we are now. And one of the most interesting was education. This is something Matthew he's intensely interested in. If only 2% of people rate education the top issue in the country, but when you get into these issues that are dividing us, it's not necessarily good news for the Democrats. Did pandemic hurt? Did the lockdowns hurt learning? Yeah, 3/4 of Catholic voters said, yeah, they did. Should parents have a role in teaching their kids, a role in the curriculum? And remember this, in the Virginia governor's race, you remember Terry McAuliffe, who's a solid politician and really should have known better, said no, sided with the teachers union. Glenn Youngkin sided with the parents. We know how that came out. Well, in our poll, about 2/3 of Catholic voters think parents should have a say in their curriculum. So there were some interesting findings.
Yeah, and if you have school-age children, like many of us do here at EWTN, you know really how crucial that was during that time. So that's very interesting, very interesting. Susan, I'm going to go to you now. Education is a worry for many Catholics. What does this poll reveal about the most pressing concerns for parents when it comes to schools?
Well, I thought it was interesting that they are very concerned. There's a wide consensus when it comes to whether biological boys who identify as girls should be competing against biological girls on school sport teams. By an overwhelming 63%, the Catholic voters strongly oppose this idea. And when it comes to CRT, critical race theory being taught in the classroom, again, a very strong message from the Catholic voters saying 51.9% believe that this should not be taught in the classroom, that this is something that only 11% of Catholic voters really endorse and support. So I think that is showing that when it comes, even though a majority of the people we polled for the Catholic voters were Democrats, it was by a little margin compared to Republicans, they still oppose and when it comes to these big divisive cultural issues, they're siding on more of a conservative end of the debate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matthew, I want to go to you now. We always track where Catholics stand on devotional and sacramental practices. Yeah. Let's talk a little bit more about that and what this latest poll found when it came to the real presence and confession.
Well, we have been finding consistent numbers throughout our polling of Catholic voters, and that is that 50% of Catholics believe in the real presence. That is abysmally low. It tracks in some ways with what we're finding with Mass attendance, that about 24% of Catholics go to Mass at least weekly, only 1% go daily. But then we get into the numbers of those who go to confession, for example. The numbers there are really rather depressing, that only about 50% never go to confession. within the Catholic community. So sacramental practice is a major challenge for us as a church, but again, we've talked a lot about that the disparity between those who attend Mass on a regular basis and those who don't is a predictor of how they're going to vote. So if we look at those numbers, we can go back to the question politically that those who attend Mass on a regular basis do not approve of Joe Biden in very strong numbers, whereas those who do not attend regularly really tend to approve him, but again, at a lower rate, like 75 to in the low 50s in terms of negative among Catholics who attend Mass, in the low 50s among those who don't. So it's really important for us as a church to do two things. One is to know how Catholics are attending Mass and whether they are or not, but then how they're actually living out their lives in faith on the basis of that.
Yeah, I'm curious, did those numbers surprise you at all?
No. Again, they're consistent with what we've seen. And from that standpoint, it's a very powerful lesson, but it's also a lesson, I think, for both parties to understand as they're trying to find a way to bring in enough Catholic votes to make a significant difference, especially in this campaign.
Yeah, most definitely. Carl, I want to go to you now. I know you're really a keen observer of politics and culture. How are cultural concerns for Catholics, how are they intersecting with political choices in this election?
Well, you know, Tracy, that's fascinating because Joe Biden's the second Roman Catholic president. He gets no credit for that with Catholics or, frankly, secular reporters who like him on the left, you know. And this is something that if we take a step back and we think not about these issues that divide us for a minute and issues that unite us. I was alive when John F. Kennedy was president. He got every Catholic vote, and because Catholics didn't think Americans would vote for a Catholic. Well, they do now, and it's almost as though Catholic voters are free to reject a Catholic politician or embrace him. And so, taking a step back, the good news, overall good news in this poll is that people are looking at the issues. And they're saying, okay, I agree with this guy or I don't, but they're not strictly voting for that. And that's what John F. Kennedy promised America would happen, that you'd have a Catholic president would follow his conscience, maybe listen to the Pope, maybe listen to his parish priest, but he would, in the end, behave like any other American. And that's happened.
Yeah. For sure. And Susan, I want to get back out to you. You know, we really can't forget about the most pressing issue for Catholics and most Americans that this survey found, that is inflation and the economy. Will this election hang on to that, or are there other issues you think that could determine who wins?
Well, certainly most Americans, it's the number one issue, inflation and the economy. And according to this poll, the people that we talked to did not think that the Inflation Reduction Act was going to have any kind of impact on inflation and the state of the economy. And they're very, very concerned. A lot of them said that it was affecting them directly. The inflation, the 9% increase that we've seen in recent months in the price of consumer goods is directly impacting their livelihood, their way of life. And so I think that, when it comes, that's very, very significant. And you only had 10% saying that abortion was the number one issue. You do have Democrats hoping that they can mobilize voters like they did in Kansas, and it was kind of a surprise a few months ago when voters rejected this anti-abortion effort in Kansas to change their constitution. I think we have yet to see how this will impact, but when it comes to Catholic voters, their mind is focused on the economy and inflation.
Almost out of time, but Matthew, really quickly, what can we expect in our last poll?
Well, we're going to be zeroing in on the key issues as we're just going to be days away from the election. One of those is the question of abortion and how that's going to play out among Catholic voters. 87% of Catholics want some form of limitation on abortion. Is the Democrat message going to resonate with them in some fashion in terms of those who favor abortion, as we have seen, unfortunately, within the Catholic population? But we keep coming back to those economic numbers, the inflation numbers, and we'll see what over the next few weeks those numbers actually look like when these reports come out of employment and inflation. So a lot to unpack yet, and we can look forward to that in our third and final poll.
Most definitely. Thank you all again for being here. We really appreciate it.